Oh my gosh, there are so many people here before me. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I see. Hi, Becky. Hey. Okay, everyone's popping up. Perfect. Okay, so I like how we're doing this with our speakers having their videos on for now. That is lovely. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the Basecamp chat about ambassadorships, sponsored athletes, influencers, whatever you want to call them. We actually got a couple questions about what's the difference between all of those. So we are going to be kicked out of this meeting at 5:40. So we are going to dive in. And what we're going to do to start is just have everybody introduce themselves, and we will start with Becky.
Okay, hi, let's just dive right in. I am Becky Marcelliano. I am calling in from Ogden, Utah, Eastern Shoshone land, and I am talking primarily on behalf of Solomon. I work for Solomon. I'm the outdoor marketing manager there and have been for about 2 years. So I manage part of our team. I will have to say I'm not the only person behind the scenes at Solomon working on our athlete and ambassador teams. I'm just one of several of us. So yeah, I'll give you my thoughts both personally and on behalf of the outdoor category that I manage, and then on behalf of the brand as best I can as well across all categories, ski, snowboard, and run as well. So I think I'll keep it short. That's it.
Thank you. Scott, you're just next in the picture for me. So if you want to go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Briscoe. I identify as he, him. I am calling from what is Nevada City, California, the land of the Nisenan. I am the founder of and the executive director of We Got Next. It's a nonprofit that amplifies individual stories from underrepresented communities and outdoor spaces. Quite a mouthful. But I have been active in the adventure, conservation, and environmental spaces since the mid 80s. And as a biracial male, identify as Latino and African American. I just never saw anybody who looked like me. And that was from the spaces that I was in to, the ambassador categories, to the executives in the with the corporations that I worked for. And because of that, and the small towns that I lived in, that I admired and wanted to live in, from Steamboat Springs, Colorado, to Haines, Alaska, to Leavenworth, Washington. These are spaces that I admire and appreciate and work to protect, and I play in. But because I never saw anybody who looked like me, it became really challenging to remain in those spaces. So I founded We Got Next. We're in our second year. We've got 10 ambassadors, which is what we call them, and they're putting together projects and expeditions that will commence next year.
Thank you, Scott. Latoya, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It depends on where you are. My name is Latoya Shante Snell. I am the founder of Running Fat Chef. I recently became an LLC. I am known as a food and fitness blogger of that site of Running Fat Chef, where I share some of my unadulterated, uncensored experiences of being in the outdoors, being a multi-sport athlete. Most people know of my journey through ultra running and the marathon scene and the road marathon scene. However, I don't limit myself as an athlete. I am currently venturing into the triathlon world. I've done things, everything from powerlifting to actually pole dancing for a year. And it's been an amazing adventure thus far. What I've noticed of being in the outdoor industry, especially as a late bloomer in life, I'm currently 35 going on 36. I've been in these different layers of sports for a little bit, pretty close to like about a decade now. what I've noticed is that there's not a lot of space when it comes down to for people that identify as women or non-binary. There's not a lot of space that's open for people who happen to identify or acknowledge as them being, or the outside looking at them as plus size. Sometimes the term plus size is thrown into people who are a size 8'10" versus someone like me that's kind of like a 18'20". Depends on the give and take of the day. Uh, Additionally, being Black, being queer, being in so many sections that would consider me as it's almost like I was kind of got thrown into being an intersectional activist before ever acknowledging myself as one. It's one of those traps that I feel that when you are in the space and you are very vocal and you're very comfortable, at least, in the public eye, and speaking up on the things that you're passionate about, people kind of instantly lump you into the category without ever asking you permission of how do you identify or view yourself. So being that I am kind of like a conventional loudmouth, I did actually, fall into place and say, you know what, maybe this is the space that I want to be in. As I started experiencing things like hazing, bullying, online bullying, I started speaking up in those areas. But these days, I've started venturing off into talking about being an ambassador for several brands, what to actually look out for, what are some of the predatory things that's out there, and other things beyond that. I recognize that in this space, we speak about authenticity, but we don't speak so much about money. So thank you so much for inviting me here.
It is our pleasure to have you. And Eli, let us know who you are.
Great. First off, wonderful to be with all of you, and super excited for the panel that's here. And I'm excited to get to learn from all of you. This is amazing. So I'm also calling from Utah, Salt Lake City area. It's funny because I would think that by now I would have like a good intro for something like this. But I feel like I still fail to provide a decent intro. Love spending time in the mountains. I have a small family, and I love to take them out there, and we spend so much time together out in the mountains, and I've been so grateful for that. And one of the things that I love most is creating, powerful moments that teach and that we can learn more about ourselves. That's one of the reasons why I love taking my families out into the outdoors specifically. That has contributed to the founding of Gnarly Nutrition nearly 8 years ago. So as one of the founders, we really wanted to inspire people to become their very, very best, whatever that may be. Define it yourself. And we happen to use sports nutrition to help support people through that. We do work with a number of athletes and ambassadors, influencers, because they definitely help increase that mark of where we all want to be, and they inspire us, whether it's in some kind of physical manner or project they're working on, or simply the way that they choose to live their humanity. And I think that that's one of the things I'm really interested in as a brand, is bringing the humanity into our brands. And I think that a powerful part of working with influencers and or people is being able to tell their stories and share their stories, and learn how to do that in a way that really shows who these individuals are, and not just because of their feats. So that's something I've loved learning, and getting to rub shoulders with all these incredible people that we get to work with. Gnarly Nutrition is, an all natural sports nutrition company based here in Salt Lake. We're a pretty small brand, and because we're a pretty small growing brand, I've gotten to wear the hats of all different responsibilities, which does oftentimes include working and managing the athlete team that we have. So grateful to be with you all.
Awesome. Well, as everyone can see, we have a pretty stellar powerhouse panel here. So the way we're going to do this is, if you have a question for these folks, use the raise your hand feature. I do not see the raise your hand feature on my Zoom right now. So if someone can confirm that that's actually like a thing in an unpaid Zoom account, that would be fantastic. If it's not a thing, if you want to pop on your camera then we can know to call on you. And if all else fails, you can just put it in the chat. I'll monitor that if you have a question and I can call you up. Until then, okay, people see raise hand. Okay, perfect. So let's do the raise hand. We're going to start out with a question from me though, because most people had the same question. And that is, as an ambassador or working with a brand in any capacity, how do you determine your compensation is fair? How do you know you're getting a good deal? How do you know you're not going to take an advantage of? And then also, like, do these programs compensate in cash?
I'm sorry. Should one of us actually jump onto that one?
Yes, I'm so sorry. If anyone, I'm not going to call on people. If you can just, if you have something to say, please do.
Okay.
But I'm so happy that you're jumping in first.
Okay, yes, I'll definitely take that on. It's definitely, it's hard to actually gauge, because here's the thing: when it comes down to ambassador programs itself, for some companies it's actually a fairly new concept, and then sometimes that term, and I might be jumping the gun and actually saying this, sometimes the term influencer is sometimes mixed up with the terminology of being an ambassador. Here's the thing: you can absolutely get paid through both. When I'm going to bluntly say, and this is something I emphasize these days to companies, is that product is not payment. It does not cover my lights, my gas. It does not cover my child's medical expenses. But you want to be able to articulate this in a professional manner to the company that you are interested in. Before you ever talk about numbers, you want to know what both of you can offer each other. Even if the company reaches out to you or you decide to reach out to them, you should both know that this is going to be a mutually benefiting situation. Some people look at it and say, wow, that amazing company reached out to me. I really love their products. But then you have to ask yourself, wow, I'm amazing too. What do I actually have to offer? Now, that number is going to reflect different depending upon the person. Maybe you do have an ideal number in mind. Maybe your number is quote unquote high. Maybe it's low. Maybe you do not know what that number is. What I would expect for anyone to do, whether you've been in this field for a long time or you're just entering into this territory, is to do your due diligence and actually researching. Now, some people are not going to be forthcoming in telling that information. It may be because they're underneath an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And then there's some who are willing to give you a ballpark information of, hey, this is the range that you might want to look for as X, Y, and Z. Now, here's the thing. Now, I can speak from an influencer standpoint, I can speak from a business perspective, and I can speak from the perspective of being an ambassador. There are just some programs out there, especially when we're talking about small businesses, where there is just really no, like, they just started out and they just do not have the money there. But then you have to ask yourself, is there something else that they can barter off with you aside from their products? Because we are talking about time. Time is money. If you are going to invest your time, energy, and space towards a brand or an individual, you need to make sure that it's actually worth it. Is there something that you're looking to gain from this? Are you looking to gain more of a following? Are you looking to gain more opportunities that might, maybe they can help you shake hands with someone who can actually help you get paid? Do I turn down every gig that may not meet that specific number that I'm looking for? So when I started off in the beginning, I was anti-influencer because I had no idea of what an influencer actually was. Sometimes we hear the term influencer, we're like, oh, here goes this person promoting the product that, we don't know. Oh, great, she's going to offer us diet water. We don't need that. And it's not so much of, that's not the case. The reality of it is that you're a marketing tool for a brand. And you have to ask, what are the requirements? What are they looking for out of you? So these are the things that I factor in when someone reaches out to me, whether you have a publicist, whether you are acting as your own agent, whether you have a contract lawyer, whatever the case may be, you need to take in consideration the following. Are they expecting you to post on social media at certain times a month? Are they looking for you to sell their products? Are they offering an incentive where they are throwing out hey, we'll give you back a kickback every time someone purchases this underneath your link. It's usually considered an affiliate link. Is there a limit on how much gear that they can give you? There are some agreements where they're like, hey, we can give you access to this, but we can't give you access to that. If you're working with clothing or with footwear, you need to ask, do they actually serve my size? That's something that I always have to bring up in an inbox to people. And they're like, hey, we really love you. It's usually a generic inbox. It's like, we really love what you represent online. This is this. And I love you. I am El Shante. And I'm like, oh, I would love you too if you actually offered a size 18. So ask yourself, did the person do research on you? And even if you are a fan, did you do research on them? How much do you know? Do you have an idea of what questions that you can bring to the table? Most times companies will reach out to you and they already have a number in mind. One of the biggest things that I see happen in this space is I hear the term low engagement thrown around. It is something that's oftentimes thrown around into this space. It's like a dirty word where a lot of us influencers or, people who are in this space that do this full time, we're just like, what exactly does low engagement actually mean? Now, typically, it's supposed to mean that you have less than 1% when it comes down to your engagement. But I can tell you personally that I've invested in programs like CrowdTangle to realize that certain things that companies say that they can see, they're not actually seeing. The only people that would see those type of real life statistics would be the user themselves. That once you have knowledge, you have power. You have to understand the terminology, and whatever you do not understand the terminology in, maybe it means that you invest in hiring someone who actually does. You invest in a team, because after you grow but so big, or if you grow, whether you're talking about of a numerical standpoint as an influencer or talking from a business perspective, you're going to need a team. You're not going to be able to do all of these things on your own. And when you feel like you're burnt out, that's when your team can actually say, have you considered this, this, and this? Have you checked off your spots here, here, and here? But I don't want to take over completely, so I'm going to stop right there.
No, Latoya, you just took us to class. That's good. Everything you said, I'm like, this is being recorded. I'm taking notes. If I can just lend just an additional perspective to everything incredible that Latoya just shared, I think also the looking at it or sharing this from the perspective of an underrepresented community. So whether that's somebody who's plus size or LGBTQ plus, identifies as a body of culture or has a cognitive or physical difference. Any of those kind of underrepresented communities, the communities that we haven't historically seen in these major brands as ambassadors, as marketing influencers. I think that it's incredibly important to think of in this day and age when brands and companies are looking to have social impact, which is great and important and needed. If you are of one of those identities, what does that mean in terms of your additional compensation? Because that means that you're entering into a space because of how you identify and in a space where you haven't historically been seen. You have knowledge, you have power and experience in that identity. And I think that that's critically important for those underrepresented communities who have not been seen, is to really take that into consideration when negotiating or thinking about that type of compensation that you're looking to receive from those brands that are out there right now.
Is it possible I can actually piggyback right on that comment as well? I would love to actually add in there. If you actually are in a position of power and you recognize that you are the only one in the room that is a problem. What I mean by this is that there are times I've actually, like years before, when I was starting to come into a position where my following was starting to grow, where I was starting to understand what direction that I was going into, and I realized that there were certain amenities that were not that companies wanted to hire me, but did not remember to actually keep in mind. One big thing is my hair. Another big thing would be my skin color. So Imagine walking into a set and you realize that there's a team of 5 that's gathering around each other because they don't know how to match your quote unquote difficult skin, or to notice that people are calling your locks braids, not knowing how to actually style your hair, so much to the point where the person who was paid and assigned to do those things cannot adequately do that job for you because they never considered you. This is unfortunately the reality of so many people who are part of marginalized communities. It is not, I am not a stranger to it. These days, I've learned how to actually speak up loud enough to say, hey, you might have considered this, but just in case, can I ask about this? Other things I've taken into consideration, like regardless of what you bring up, understand everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. The only thing that's not negotiable is whatever you do not bring to the table. So if you do not bring that up, there's a chance, and I mean, there's the reality of it, you're not going to know everything. You're not going to know everything to consider. You might be working on 5 or 6 gigs, and it's like, okay, great. Did I say this to this brand, or did I say this to the other person that I spoke to? You know, taking consideration of who's in the room. Is there diversity in the room? If a company is asking you to be on their advertisement campaign, but then now they throw at you in the last 5 minutes, hey, can you speak on DEI? That is another fee. For anyone who is not aware of what the term DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. When someone throws at you a contract in particular, let's say that you signed the dotted line, you're like, great, I'm with this company, I'm doing an ambassador program, which is typically a long-term contract, or maybe an influencer contract where it's something that's shorter term, maybe it's a one-time gig, something that they pick up every now and then. You want to take in consideration of the things that's going to be weaved in. And if there's something else that comes up, like let's say that they say it's going to be an 8-hour shift and this turns into 12 hours, did you actually negotiate that rate in advance of, hey, we're crossing that mark and you're asking me to do a couple of things. Did we establish a fee for that? You know, so you're not scrambling last moment and you don't feel like it's that, ooh, awkward. Now I have to figure this out on the fly, or, oh, you know, we're just asking for 15 minutes. Your time, your space, your energy, your brain, your creativity, your thoughts should be compensated.
I can chime in here from the brand side. That was, yeah, I'm going to piggyback too on a lot of it because it was, those were some incredible thoughts, and I support all of that, even coming from the other side. But there's no right answer. There's no like industry cheat sheet for this stuff, you know, and there's times that I wish that there was. And most of the time I'm really glad that there's not, because like every single one of these conversations that brand and essentially human behind the brand has with potential ambassador, they're all different because every single person comes to the table with different strengths, right? Like it's not just about social following. Like everyone has a different skill set, different values that they're bringing to the table that you can't necessarily quantify specifically with dollars in a contract. So you have to really have those conversations that, like, more than anything else, need to be built on trust, right? Like all influencer marketing in general is built on trust. That's why it works, right? Like an influencer posts something on social media, their audience trusts the influencer, therefore they hear about the product, they love the product, hopefully they buy the product somewhere in that buying funnel, right? So the relationship between the brand and the influencer has to be built on that same level of trust. And if you're a brand out there managing a team, like you have to mama bear super hard to build those relationships, especially when you're working with marginalized groups, because I feel like I have to earn those conversations. I have to earn that trust, and make sure that I'm doing it right. And that takes a lot of finesse, a lot of real openness and trust, to build that. So I think maybe that's just like my one addition there. At how we do it at Solomon, many people do get paid, but not everyone gets paid. We actually have 3 different tiers to the team. The first tier is often kind of like a feeder program. It's we actually just give them a pro deal and still get them involved as kind of like, they're usually new influencers and they often tend to have a lesser following, but we believe in them. We love their content. We love what they're doing. It doesn't necessarily make sense to have like a really robust relationship yet, but we look at those people, we look at the metrics behind the scenes through the platforms that we use, and we elevate those people going into the next year. Then our main squad does receive in-kind product from us, and the top tier is on paid contracts, and that's across the board in all of our categories. I just manage the paid team for the outdoor category, and yeah, I mean, what I love about it is like I get to figure out what strengths each person's bringing to the table, right? Like maybe they have a large social following. That's the obvious one that we always look at first, right? But I'd also argue that that's maybe not necessarily the most important. Like classic case, like mountain guide, right? Like you'd be lucky if a mountain guide maybe has 2,000 Instagram followers, but where's their real value to the brand? Where's their real influence happening? It's happening offline. So as a brand, it depends on what you're looking for. Like, do you only want to measure social metrics? Then maybe that guide is not your best bet. But I'd also argue that like sometimes those in-person real life, hey, I love your shoes, what are you wearing moments are more meaningful and more impactful than what happens in an Instagram post. So anyway, that was kind of a long tangent, but those are the things that I think about. And then when it comes to negotiating, there's what I really don't like in the negotiation process is people that come to me with a very one-sided approach. They sort of forget the mutual benefit that it should be. And it's just, I want more money because I deserve it. And you know what? That statement is true. However, this is a partnership. Like, why do they love Salomon? What upcoming adventures do they have that they're going to be so stoked to wear our shoes? And why is our brand the right fit? Like, if you can come with your story and your why and like raise the stoke about you wanting to work with us, then it becomes a conversation much more about money. And like, absolutely, I'm going to fight to find you more money in that negotiation process. So yeah, you have to kind of prove that like, you're not just in it for yourself. Like, how do we make this fair? How do we make this mutually beneficial? Let's do this together. And as I'm building a team, final thought here, like if there's a negotiation process and I find, say, more money to give to a certain influencer, that might mean that I can't sign on some other rad human, right? Like our bank accounts, our budgets are not infinite. So I have to make those hard choices of like, someone's fighting for this money, but that literally might mean that I don't get to sign on this other up and comer that's just looking for a couple grand to get started in his career. So it's like, there's not a right or a wrong here, right? It's a really big balance behind the scenes of how do I build the best puzzled together team of human beings that are we're going to be able to give the most to as a brand and amplify the most voices and stories, and pay appropriately, and do that to the greatest scale that we can. So anyway, it's complicated when you're a brand and you only have a set budget. Like, how do you slice it and dice it to make the most impact?
Eli, did you? Okay.
Just a couple quick thoughts, because we have a program that's very similar to what Becky mentioned with Salomon, where we do a kind of tiered program. And we also really like to look at individuals from a very holistic perspective, meaning a number of our athletes don't do anything on social, but there's other values that we find valuable, and thus we want to work with them, or they want to work with us. And being a smaller brand, it's always kind of a hard thing working with athletes and or influencers, because we don't have as much resources to leverage as a lot of larger brands do, and so it's very, very tricky, especially an individual may be getting paid to represent one brand, and so they expect to be paid, that's the value that they create for this brand. And so then if they come to us, there's a similar expectation, and it's just not possible. I mean, just as an example, because we do work with a number of North Face athletes, but there's a number of top tier North Face athletes that we will never be able to afford as a brand. And even if they came to us and they like, we want to work with you guys so bad, we love what you guys do, this is what we charge. We're just like, sorry, no, it doesn't, like we just simply can't, right? It's a simple math equation. And I think that's the same thing for influencers or ambassadors. If we go to them and they expect us to pay them a certain amount, or they need a certain amount in order for us to work with them, and we can't do that, they can simply tell us no too. And I think that it's having those kinds of conversations that are obviously super important, because there's no just line that everybody can draw in the industry that says, you know, my time's worth this, and thus you should pay me this. I think one of the interesting things that we've experienced with our brand, and specifically our product, is we do have we create a consumable product, and thus on a monthly basis we are creating value for our athletes. So the ones that we provide in-kind product, you know, in some ways we aren't paying you cash, but we are also for people who use products like ours continuously, we're saving you money from having to go out and purchase it elsewhere, right? And so there is a value that we can provide that is cash based, but it's through product. But again, I don't expect everybody to value that the same, and thus, you know, I can't go to everyone and say, well, this is how we compensate, and this is the only way we compensate. I think what we have done is we've tried to be very mindful based off of what we are able to give, the value that we are able to give. We try to tier what we ask of someone, right? So our level of ambassadors that do get a discount, we ask a whole lot less of them, right? We let them kind of organically manage how much they bring Gnarly and our products into their life and what they do with it. And then as we move into product-based relationships, that we ask for a little bit more. And then finally the compensation side, that's where we expect more, because we are also compensating for that. And one of the interesting things that we're exploring right now is a little bit of a hybrid, where we have this tier where we just do in-kind product. And if we have a specific ask, let's say a photo shoot, then we pay for that day rate of a photo shoot, right? And it's a way that we can now start to compensate our influencers or athletes that we're working with. We may not be able to afford a salary for the whole year, but we can pay, you know, for these one-off kind of for your time and or the value that you're creating. So it's a creative way for us to try to compensate where we're asking for specific things.
Awesome. I think that was so valuable already. And then in the chat, Micah asked such a great question about, you know, influencer, whatever you want to term, representation for brands. Minorities or people from marginalized groups are often called upon solely to represent or to come at something with a DEI lens. So for instance, that outdoor retailer, you know, it's like, hey, come to this stage for DEI. And basically, if you're already interested in DEI, you're going to go there. I'm not saying you know everything about DEI already, but you probably know a lot, and it's not reaching the whole audience. It's not reaching the skeptics. You're not on the main stage. So what could the role of influencers be in that problem? Or, I mean, even if it goes above and beyond ambassadors and influencers, like how can that problem be solved better?
I would love to actually contribute just as an influencer and the person that's been placed in that position a lot last year. For one, I am not a monolith. I am not just one thing. I am not just the Black athlete. I am not just the queer athlete. I am not the athlete who happens to be disabled with multiple invisible diagnoses. I am not the token athlete that will walk into a room and magically answer all of those questions. I will definitely not fit into a perfectly neat square, nor can I speak from everybody else's experience. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, sometimes I feel like a lot of these companies do not know anything about it aside from the words. And when companies fail to acknowledge that DEI is important more than just speaking about it from a racial standpoint, speaking about it from a body type standpoint, speaking about it from maybe even a religious standpoint. I feel like a lot of companies miss the mark and they just look at it as marketing, as, oh, this is the thing that we have to fill in at this moment so we can trend. Like, that's not acceptable. It is actually is more like shame on you. It's definitely a shame on you moment, because we've already been seeing this for years. And I say that from not just as a Black woman, but I say this as when I think about the history of sports, when you think about the Catherine Switzlers of the world who basically had to jump into a sport just to be embraced as a woman in this sport. And now we are in 2021, still fighting for equality for transgender athletes to be accepted in this sport. And the DEI, this is like brushing your teeth and washing your face. If you are able to talk with me, then you're already taking in parts of my Black experience, not something that you're looking at on the advertisement. My personal experience. When you talk to me, when you engage with me, when you choose to put me on your marketing material, before you even think about putting me on a panel, you are already invested in the DEI work. I deserve to be on the main stage. There's no reason why the only thing that you know how to use me, and I don't mean you, anybody in particular, I just mean in general, when it comes down to brands, that the only thing that we are known in marginalized communities are the things that sometimes people on the outside who are not experiencing these hardships or these struggles is looking at us as a violin story to amplify your brand, to make it look like, hey, I donated to the NAACP, so now I'm in this club. That's not acceptable. Because when we are telling these stories, especially when we're telling it from a place of vulnerability, we're telling it from an authentic standpoint, we are still here with these stories. It doesn't matter what paycheck that you give in. It doesn't matter what you think that you contributed at that moment. After you're done with your DEI, program, you did your 2-hour seminar, you did your 4-hour workshop. What did you learn from it? Who are you going to bring to the table? How are you going to diversify your team? How are you going to consider your customers who are all part of this DEI work? So yes, like what can brands actually do? Stop looking at Black, brown, and indigenous people as just DEI. That's a great start. Is that, to me, a lot of this stuff has been really simple. We're waiting for the next Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate campaign or whatever the fill in the blank at the moment may be. Instead of overcomplicating simple things, a lot of this, all of it has in common, is that we're all demanding human rights issues. So instead of looking at this as the cliche term of DEI, what do humans want out of other humans to do? If we take away your brands, when you clock out at the end of the day, I don't look at you as a brand. Even when you're on the clock, even when I talk with the companies that I partner with, I don't partner with big brands because, oh wow, they have a bright and shiny name. I partner with them because of the individuals who made me believe in that brand, who sold me on more than just their shoe, that sold me on more than just their product. I need to feel that. I am much more than just an influencer. For me, I'm a storyteller. So when I'm going out there on these platforms and I'm talking to people, I'm just like, hey, you know what? That money sounds great, but you can't buy me. When you have that power in yourself and you get to know yourself, and the thing is, we're gonna get to know ourselves layer by layer, day by day, as a new event unfolds. The most important thing about doing this type of work is to respect it. And we know that we're not going to be able to convince everyone in the room, but to be able to touch one, that's a hell of a job to actually accomplish. So what I humbly ask of brands to do is to stop just looking at the surface things, to just really think of it and close your eyes. If you can't relate to that person, close your eyes and imagine someone that you love and ask yourself, how do you want them to be heard? How do you want them to be amplified if they were in my position?
Does anyone else from the panel want to take that question in particular?
Yeah, second class completed. Yeah, Latoya, thank you so much. I really think I couldn't agree with her more in terms of like specifically looking at influencers and ambassadors, or folks that fall under those sports categories with the brands and organizations that identify as an traditionally, historically underrepresented community member. They should not be talking about DEI. They should not be in those spaces. I think that them in those spaces, just as they are in their existence, they are diversity, equity, and inclusion, as she said. I think that there's something so much bigger to just add some more to what Latoya was saying. I understand that these are businesses, they're companies, there's strategies that are involved, and there's bottom lines that need to be met. And that's all critically important for the impact that the business is trying to make within itself, and the greater impact in the work that they're striving to do, in terms of whatever type of social impact they're looking at making. And I think that this is heart-centered work. When you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is like there's a lot of, you're talking about race, and you're talking about gender inequality and size inequality. And those are really, I believe they're traumatizing they can be traumatizing conversations. So I do not think that, ambassadors, influencers that identify, unless they are making that choice very actively on their own, in which case they need to be compensated considerably for. I do not think that they should be asked to step onto those stages. I think one great action that brands can take is really looking at their organization and their company at a deep level. I would look at individuals who do cultural trauma training at the leadership level. And then I would look at co-conspirators that are within that organization. I'm so lucky to be connected with folks like Claire Gallagher and Luke Evans and Conrad Anker. Like, these are folks that I look at as ambassadors that are co-conspirators, that are out there on their social media channels and their spaces, talking about their place as a white ambassador, a white male, a white female, and what that means and what can be changed. So I think that brands can start looking at the ambassadors and the teams that they have to really help to add to that conversation.
Could we hop over to, okay, so first of all, it's past I-40 and we didn't get kicked out. So I don't really know what's happening, but if the panelists are fine with continuing on, I'm going to ask one more question. And that is, how do we start these conversations? Like, let's say you're like, listen, I have a story to tell. I love your brand. I want to pair up. How do you start this conversation tactically? Where? And then, you've all touched on this a little bit, but like, how do you really get the attention of a brand in such a saturated market?
Well, for one, if they haven't made the move towards you, then you have to make the lead towards them. So the way that we would do it in marketing is you would do like almost like cold calls, so if a company doesn't have you, if you're not following a brand, like let's say that you're doing this strictly through social media. If you're not following the brand, and they're probably definitely not going to actually see you on the radar. Now, when it comes down to algorithms like Instagram or Facebook, I tend to market towards companies that I already say I can throw my money at them without them taking me on for a sponsorship or ever partnering up with me. That's the way I always go about it. I look at it from the perspective of a person who is invested in the market. What things would I want to invest in if I know nothing about investment? Invest in the things that you would pay for out of your pocket. So I have to use toilet tissue. I have to brush my teeth. I have to eat every day. I have to wear this gear just to be able to do the things that I want. So first thing I ask myself is, what is my wish list of people or partners or brands or individuals that I want to partner up with? So I start to research the company. I learn about about that company. Secondly, I start to look at their page, or maybe I go onto their website. Let's say that we're taking this off of social media. Let's say that we want to go to their website, or you want to do a little bit of research and learn about the company. If you want to stand out in the crowd, then give them something to actually be able to recognize you. It is not enough that I walk in and say, "Hey, I'm fat, black, and queer, and I'm an athlete. Hire me." That's just not going to work. Like, I mean, in a perfect world, I mean, if it was that easy, then I'd probably be employed everywhere, but that's not the case. Even as a person who have a large following, I have moments where I'm just like, I would really love to work with this brand, but I don't think they actually notice me. The first thing you should acknowledge in yourself is that you are brand new to someone. Even if you feel like you are a household name, you are new to someone. I can mention and say, "Hey, I love Diana Ross," and to my 13-year-old, he's like, "Diana who?" So you realize that you are new to someone. Secondly, if you're interested in that brand, maybe you know what, maybe you got to throw out your cold calls, your modern day cold calls. So that means doing the research and finding out an email address, maybe asking someone who's already partnered with them that you have a relationship with. Maybe you utilize your LinkedIn, maybe you utilize your Instagram, utilize your Facebook, utilize someone who shook hands with this one that shook hands with someone, and say, how do I actually, can you help me with an introduction conversation with this person? I'm really interested in this brand. And then think to yourself, how can I provide that elevator pitch? Now, I'm long-winded, so I am not great with elevator pitches, but what I am great with is being able to utilize the power of storytelling and saying how that brand made me feel, how I felt seen. So when I thought about, let's say, for instance, Essence Magazine, I have a story with it. When I was 9 years old, I felt like I didn't see myself anywhere except for when I opened up the pages of Essence. And I just loved them. I loved that I was able to see a person that looked like me, someone who was talking about the things I was interested in. I felt like I was less alone. Now ask yourself, how can you pitch yourself to a brand that same way? The reality of it, as I used to be in a managerial position before all of this, before I ever thought I would ever be an influencer. And I treat like engaging any type of company or any type of brand that I'm interested in, I treat it like a resume. Resumes usually last in people's hands for about 15 to 20 seconds, and they're like, oh, not interested. Put all of your valuable things in one paragraph and say, hey, I would love to work with you for X, Y, and Z, and this is what I have to offer. And you give them that information on how to follow you up with. Make sure that your punctuation is correct. I mean, small things like that actually can be a make or break. How are you going to promote something and you can't spell it? How do you promote something and you don't know anything about the products? How do you promote anything and you don't even know who the person that's running the company? You don't know anything about their ethics. Just take it from a old school standpoint, and I think that's how I get a lot of my gigs. I don't look at it as I'm the person that's on Instagram that has 62,000 people. Oh, they can find me. No, that's not the case. You have to pitch yourself. So if you want to represent someone or something, make it worth it. That means that maybe you actually wear some of the products that you have on hand and you tag them in an Instagram story and say, hey, and be clever about it. Hey, you know what? I love this so much. I will wear this for free, but you got to pay me. I mean, just whatever way, it might be a little bit of humor. It might be humor. It may be direct. It may be, you know what? I'm the person that's going to go on their post and I'm going to like a couple of things that interest me. One size does not fit all. Some things work for some companies, some things don't work for other companies. And as you know as the brands already mentioned on, like the two individuals that spoke on here, Becky and Gnarly actually mentioned on here, the reality of it is that some people may not have the budget for you. So you have to ask yourself, do you have a low number? Do you have a medium number? Do you have a high number? What if they don't have a number at all? Are you willing to take this on for free? Because that is quite a possibility, especially when you're starting out. Some people, when I started out, what people didn't know, I was promoting so hard for one brand, I won't put it out there, but I promoted so hard for one brand for 3 years. I got paid $170 to date. And nobody knew. Everybody just assumed I was getting paid. How did I produce product? Behind me is nothing but photography. I double as a photographer. Other things that I thought about it, I was like, what kind of creative things can I create with this product? Okay, well, cool. This product is known for sports and fitness. I'm going to wear this around my house. And now, guess what? This is athletic wear that I can wear inside of my house. You don't have to wear these leggings here. Guess what? You can go shopping with this, boo. Whatever way that you can be the best salesman, the salesperson for yourself, not just even just the brand, but for yourself, to be able to sell your skills and say, I'm confident in being able to provide this service for you. It's the way that you would reach out to them.
Yep, totally. If you, for instance, want to work with a brand on Instagram, right? Probably they're going to ask you to do stories. The best way to show a brand that you can do really cool stories for them is to do a really cool story for them and let them see that, because the person that's probably going to be working with you is probably going to see that, it's probably the one being tagged. So that's great. And then I did want to touch on one thing you said. Some brands do not have the budget. On our stage right now, we have two fairly larger brands, but there are just, mom and pop shops, entrepreneurs. It's just them. They truly do not have a budget quite yet. So being flexible and understanding and having the empathy to understand where someone's at in their business, I think is important, because there's people here today that I know they really want to honor their ambassadors and their influencers, and are trying to figure out how to do that without a cash budget. So I love all of these examples and ways to do that are not exclusively monetary.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts to share. I've worked with athletes who we haven't been able to pay before, and we leave a very open agreement on the table where if there's an opportunity that helps that athlete do what they do better, and it means leaving, our relationship, I'm all about supporting them moving on. And we've done that a number of times with athletes. Athletes come to me, Eli, this X brand's going to pay me, da 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 da. And I'm like, great. And sometimes it's a great experience and sometimes it's awful. And the athlete realizes that getting paid by that brand wasn't worth being associated with the brand and getting the dollars. And they come back and they're like, culturally, you represent us better, or me better as an athlete. Your values are more important. I like your products better. I use your products more than I use this other brand. Whatever the reason is, there are other reasons why someone might work with a brand, and those can be more meaningful to someone than dollars. Now, also with that said, I don't think that. Sorry, lost my train of thought. The athletes, I think that athletes or influencers or ambassadors, however you see yourself, I think one of the most important things to ask yourself is why you want to work with X brand. And not just work with them because you want to be connected somehow to a brand or whatever, because that ultimately is going to help you be most honest with yourself and therefore be able to communicate the value that you can create for that brand the best. We get hit up by individuals all the time that want, a sponsorship or a partnership or whatever, and they know nothing about our brand. They've never tried our products. They have no idea what's going on. They just want they want free stuff, and those people are automatically weeded out of even a conversation, right? And then we have other people who will send a stacked resume of all of the amazing rad things that they've done. And those individuals will go to our next step, which oftentimes we try to ask, some basic questions. And yes, it's formatted, same questions that everyone get, but we just try to understand them in a little bit more in depth than just a resume. Because a resume is awesome, but that doesn't tell us about who you are as a person and what other values are important to you and what you care about outside of, oftentimes for us, whatever sport you're doing. So it's awesome that you stand on every podium that you do, but what else do you care about, right? So I'm sure we've weeded out people who are phenomenal athletes and influencers because we didn't feel like there was enough dimension for us to work with them. And it has nothing, we're not trying to be offensive at all, but like, we want top tier athletes, people who do stand on podiums, but we also want people who, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning, like, who bring humanity to their sport as well, who bring humanity to their influence and create more depth than just their sport. And we're constantly trying to balance all of those things. So I think, you know, it's been mentioned here, but really being thoughtful about the value you can create for a brand and communicating that value. And today there's so much emphasis put on social media, but that's not always the value that is most important.
Yeah, and I would encourage someone, if you're trying to figure out how to answer that humanity question, a really good place to start is answering the question, what is community to you and how are you serving yours? Because that's going to show who you are really quickly.
I definitely agree. Not all money is good money. There's going to be situations or agreements that you'll get into, and initially it feels great, and then you start to kind of, you know, find yourself growing apart from a company or individual, and you're just like, I'm not really feeling this anymore. You know, really think long and hard before you get caught up on the idea of this thing looks bright and shiny and it's like a great opportunity. Whatever you do, please don't go into it just for the product. I see too many people that actually do that, where it's just like, oh, I did this for the product and now I have to pay for it, and I'm just like, okay, that's great. What are you offering back? Do you have any type of, like, I don't expect everybody to be, you know, like this, you know, this award-winning, you know, humanitarian, but, you know, if you are in a place of privilege, and I say that from a standpoint of, like, for me, I'll say that, you know, having a large following is a place of privilege. I know that people will take me a little bit more serious because I have more people who are engaged with me, and they'll take my word. I can say that the sky is purple, and I'll have probably about 15% that will believe me. You know, do it with a level of integrity, do it a level of pride. Please understand what you are entering in, that you're just, I don't care how large or small the company is, that there's someone that's behind the scenes that's doing this with their entire heart, just as you are doing it with your entire heart when you're going out there and you're representing these companies. You know, get to know what their, you know, their mission statement is, get to know what their core values are, get to know if they actually give back. That's a huge thing for me. Like, for me, on a personal note, I'm just like, how can I actually give back on some of these things that I personally wouldn't be able to afford if I wasn't partnered up with this organization? Okay, well, they can't pay me this number, but can they actually help me with a community effort? Can they help me, you know, host a bike ride or a run in my neighborhood? Can I get more, you know, people who don't see themselves, like, when I was growing up, I didn't have any interest in sports aside from, like, maybe knocking out a kid at school. You know, like, when I think about that as a kid, and I'm just growing up into this adult, and I'm like, wow, I'm an adult trying to learn how to swim at 35 years old, and these things weren't available to me when I was younger, because maybe it wasn't in my neighborhood, maybe I didn't have the resources. How can I give back, and how can I get, maybe it's not a financial thing, maybe they can actually help with a product, and now it's more of a help me help you help us kind of situation of, now I can help the community grow. I can help, you know, I can, you know, it has some, when I think about the reason why I signed on as an influencer and an ambassador with companies is because I was so anti influencer initially, because I thought that's what people looked at it as you're only taking gifts and products. And I was just like, what am I going to get from this? What I get from this role is being able to give back every single day. So granted, yes, I have partnerships that I do get paid from, but I'm able to share with my community through social media, through programs like this, you know, through talking with my with locals, where they're like, "Hey, what kind of shoe do you should I get?" And I'm like, "Hey, how about I recommend you to a professional that can actually give you that type of information, because just because I'm an influencer does not mean that I am qualified to give you those type of answers." That's the beauty of being in this space, that you are able to help people grow. I mean, I can't tell anybody for what their reasons and their why of why they move. But when I represent brands, when I represent brands, I'm not just representing them, I'm representing a part of myself. And if you're going to enter this space, it has to be much more than just, I need someone to make sure that my money is right and I get paid on the 1st and 15th. That's just not going to roll. You're going to have a very short life in this, because believe me, and probably in the next 5 or 10 years, they'll probably be calling influencing an ambassador program something else, but it will still be some form of marketing. And then you have to ask yourself, what exactly do you have to offer, and what do they have to offer to you?
Becky, really quick before we go, if you have like 60 seconds, I think a lot of folks came today to figure out how to get the attention of someone like Becky, when someone that's running an ambassador program for Solomon. So do you have any, just quick things for who is standing out to you these days?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I am always happy and will read emails that come my way. So I would say if you're try to find the person behind the brand that you really care about. And then I absolutely reinforce very hard the concept of, you have to do your homework. You have to make it personal. What is your story? What is your why? That's what's going to make you stand out, is to like pull on my heartstrings a little bit, right? Like everyone has a story to tell. You just need to figure out why it aligns with the brand, and figure out how to tell that, and like put a well-crafted email together. Like if you have a deck, if you're an influencer that's pretty far and you have that resource, great, attach it. If you don't, that's just fine. Like write a couple paragraphs of what you have to add to the program. So I think it's just all goes back to like the human connection of this type of marketing, right? That we've talked about so many times already tonight. And I love, like, that's how I think. And that's my strengths as a marketer, is like connecting with people and understanding just how we like make each other better together, right? Like that's what an influencer program or ambassador team is. Like it is a community. Like the thing that if I have a one-liner of like how to build a good ambassador team, it's to build a community, not a roster. That has a very different feel to it. So like, how do you truly build that? How do you make your people feel valued? How do you make them feel like they belong to something? Because we all want to belong to something, right? Like that does have a lot of value to it. So anyway, yeah, I would say if for those of you out there that want to work with a certain brand, just go for it. And then the other thing is like, you need to figure out what the timing is. For Solomon, we really only sign on people at the beginning of the year. We tend to open up our applications in like November or early December, and then launch the team. And we do that so that we can create that community. We have like kickoff calls where there's a couple hundred people on a call, and we like give them our seasonal initiatives and raise the stoke. And like people are so stoked about that. So the other thing is like, you might reach out and get a response, but the timing's not right. So then it's on you. Okay, let me reach back out or keep my eyes out on social or whatever come November again, and make sure you're there to catch the wave for the following year. So timing is a big thing as well, but it all goes back to personal touch and human touch, and like, how do you add value to both sides?
Awesome. Okay. I think that was an incredible chat. Thank you. So I knew this was going to be a good one, but I am over the moon with this. We are so pleased to have all of you on the stage. Thank you again so much for coming. We are Basecamp. If you don't know us, I think everyone here is from the group though. Right now we are ramping up our Instagram. So if you would please follow us there at Outdoor Dream Jobs, that would be wonderful. And then we have a new site, if you haven't seen, at wearetheoutdoorindustry.com. And all of our panelists are, yes, thank you for putting your Instagram down there, Latoya. And we will put that in our little YouTube that we post of this as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting. This is awesome. Good to be with you all.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course.
Good luck to everyone.